Hello, and welcome to historic Trinidad. I'm so happy to see you here, and I'd like to introduce you to a few people that fuel Trinidad's creative fire. And the first person I'd like to introduce you to is Chris Eglin, the Vice President of the First National Bank of Trinidad.
Hello, welcome to Trinidad, Colorado Creative Industries. We are so glad that you're here. We have a lot of fun things to show you around Trinidad, and we hope that you learn some good things while you're here. Today, I'm going to share with you some things that we've done with the creative industries in Trinidad. My name is Chris Eglin, and I've been on the board of directors and with the First National Bank for a little over 30 years. So let me give you a little bit of history about the First National Bank in Trinidad. We were established in 1875, which is a year before Colorado became a state and before the city of Trinidad was incorporated. We've been under the same ownership since 1960, which is really amazing. That has allowed us the ability to collaborate with the creative industries in our community. And if you take a look at the 150th anniversary book that we published last year, you'll be able to read about the history of the bank and the history of Trinidad. So if you want to take a look at that while you're here, please do. I can imagine that some of the challenges creative industries have is finding financial support. Locating corporations that are willing to donate for your cause might be challenging. So I would encourage you to reach out to some of the smaller businesses in your community, not just for a cash donation, but see what you can come up with to work together. So here's what's worked for us in our community. We have partnered with some of the creative industries to not only further their cause, but also create a marketing opportunity for the bank. And the first project that we did along those lines was a collective series calendar. And that was born out of the idea of some artists coming to the bank and asking if we would be interested in hiring them or commissioning a custom piece of artwork to hang in the bank lobby. And we thought, that would be nice. Hire an artist, pay them to do a piece for us, and it would be on display, and maybe they might get some work out of that. And eventually we'd probably replace it with something else down the line. But that's a one and done deal. So the idea of putting together a collector series calendar was born out of that. And the idea was that we would have 12 months to put together pieces of art, custom created, based on an idea that would preserve the history of the area, which is another thing that we're rich in this community. And so for 36 years, we put together a collector series calendar that featured art from local artists, and we hired a local historian to write stories and publish that as a gift to the community. So every year in December, we have a calendar open house day, and people line up out the door in anticipation of the next year's calendar. They are collector's items that are saved in our local library and even in the library in Denver. And people come and they get to meet the artist, they get to collaborate on the next year's idea and discuss the topic of the current calendar. And so it's really well received and a great way to work together with a business within the community, promote the art within the community, and get everyone excited about it. So one year, we featured World War II veterans in our calendar. And that had a lot of spin-off. The local repertory theater put together a play sharing their stories, and the local museum put together a display of World War II memorabilia, and they had a display for each one of the veterans in the calendar where they got to tell their stories and people got to see their memorabilia, and it was really an amazing time for the community and for the veterans to be recognized for their contribution. Another thing that we did for 27 years, we published a quarterly newsletter. And in that newsletter, we hired local photographers to provide photography. We did stories on businesses and organizations and talked about the things that they had to offer. We also published local school calendars, their sports schedules, and talked about bank interests and things going on within the bank, like maybe employee anniversaries or introduce new employees. So this was something that was mailed out to 14,000 households and was read very widely. So I hope I've shared some ideas with you that might encourage you or give you some food for thought of how you can approach some of the businesses in your community. I would encourage you to reach out to your local bank, talk to their marketing director, and see if there's something that you can come up with. Be creative. Come up with ideas that benefit both you and the community and the business that you're working with. Think outside the box when soliciting support. Perhaps you'll find the support that you really need, and it'll come out of creative collaboration.
And next, I'd like to introduce you to Margaret Hunt, the pioneer behind Trinidad's Creative District.
My name is Margaret Hunt.
Nice to meet you, Margaret.
It's nice to meet you, Rachel. Well, I was previously the director of Colorado Creative Industries, which is in the Governor's Office of Economic Development. And I have an economic development background, and I have an arts background, so it was a good fit for me. And one of the programs that we ran out of Colorado Creative Industries is the Creative District program. And it's all about utilizing the notion of creativity as a catalyst for economic development and for community development, right? So creatives come in all shapes and sizes and forms. It can be film, it can be music, culinary arts. So it's much broader than the narrow definition of the arts. It's really about creative industries, creative businesses, creative people, and utilizing creative people as the catalyst for community and economic development. Well, we have a number of goals. We just refined our strategic plan for the Creative District here in Trinidad, and I'm the board chair of the district, so my life goes on. It continues on in doing this kind of work. And our primary goals are stimulating the economy around the creative industries, right? So working to promote those businesses that are here, working to support the artists and the creatives that are here. We do that through grants. We do that through sponsoring events and activities. And interestingly, a creative district gets certified by the state of Colorado once it meets certain criteria. A concentration of creatives that are documented, right? A strategic plan, endorsement by city government, because the city, it becomes certified as a creative district, not an organization, right? Okay. So the city of Trinidad on Main Street and Commercial is the heart of the creative district. Well, while I was at Colorado Creative Industries, when I started, there were 2 certified districts in the state, and they were grandfathered in through the legislation. So the art district in Salida and the art district on Santa Fe Drive. And while I was there, we expanded that to 30 creative districts. They had to apply, they had to meet the criteria. We did site visits to document that they were actually what they said they were in their application, interviewed people, and then the certification is for 5 years. And then they get renewed every 5 years. So when I accepted the job with Colorado Creative Industries in 2013, the board wanted to meet me. I was appointed by Governor Hickenlooper. And so they flew me in to meet the board. And I was just there, actually before I even started the job, right, just to meet the board. And on the board agenda were 2 communities that were applying for certification. One was Trinidad. And Tara Marshall, who is now the city manager, was the one who made the pitch, right? She worked for the city before. And she was sort of the heart and soul behind the formation of the creative district here. And a lot of my work in economic development was in rural communities in the West. And Tara followed another presentation, and she got up and shook her head and said, I can't compete with what they're doing in that community. This is why we need to be a creative district. Our coal mines have closed. Our economy, our city budget has been in the red, in the deficit for 25 years. Creative District is our only hope for economic development in Trinidad. And it was like, she just put a hook in my mouth, and I just bought in. You know, it's like, I know I can help this community. I know I can because of my work in rural communities and economic development. Yep. Right. Well, so Colorado Creative Industries started the Creative District program. And then we did a survey of the creative districts to find out what their needs were, right? After we certified a number of them, 7, I think. And their greatest need was affordable live workspace for the creatives in the community. Because what we noticed is that once a community got certified, it became hip and cool. And then property values started to go up, and the creative people, the creative entrepreneurs were priced out of the market, right? Could no longer afford to live there. The president of the Betcher Foundation, Tim Schultz, and I came up with this idea about doing real estate development in creative districts to provide affordable live workspace for the creatives and community space. And we took it to then Governor John Hickenlooper and said, we have this idea. He said, I love it, but I don't want you studying it for 2 years. Pick a demonstration project and make it happen. And we picked Trinidad. So this building that we're in right here was the very first Space to Create project in the state of Colorado. So then, out of that, Governor Polis asked for big, bold ideas for stimulating the economy during COVID. And I threw this idea out about community revitalization grants in creative districts. And the legislation was passed. It was sponsored by the Senate Majority Leader and the Senate Minority Leader, which rarely ever happens. And it passed with unanimous approval. And we then invested in 3 projects in Trinidad, $9 million. The Fox West Theater, improvements in this space, and the East Street School. So, how did I get here? After I retired, my good friend and mentor, Dana Crawford, hosted a post-retirement party for me at her home here, and she gifted me with an artist residency at the East Street School. So then I stepped fully into my role as a creative. And I work in visual arts, and I'm an author, I'm a writer. Well, the East Street School had been vacant for a number of years, right? I think over 25. And it's on the National Register of Historic Buildings. And there's an artist named Clark Rickard, who is here, who was part of Drop City many, many years ago. And he brought the project to Dana Crawford's attention, and she found some investment partners, bought the school, brought it up to code, turned the classrooms into artist live workspace, right? The Clark Rickard died before the project was completed, so there is a large gallery community room named the Clark Rickard Room. And recently, since Dana's passing, it was purchased by an organization called CAST, Community Arts Stabilization Trust. They're out of the Bay Area. They acquired the East Street School. It's the first property outside the state of California. And now it will become permanently artist live workspace for the long term. Once the state starts investing in communities, philanthropists become interested. So this project, for example, had funding from the Gates Family Foundation, El Pomar Foundation, and Betcher Foundation. Betcher Foundation was our partner in the Creative District program. they provided funding for the grants for the first 6 years. And so bringing together these partnerships with like-minded organizations is also a benefit.
And the legacy continues with the beautiful Jean Wharton, whose family built the Delissio Bank, the Swastika Hotel, the Delissio Department Store. And now we're going to hear from Jean Wharton, who's going to tell us what it was like to grow up as a kid as a Delissio in Raton.
My grandfather was Joe Delissio Sr. His wife was Christine Ponet Delissio. They started the bank with this building. The building does feel old, but it also has a sense of unification of the town. It's on the main street, 2nd Street and Cook, a block away from the train station. Across the street was the Hotel Yucca, which my grandfather also helped found as shareholders in the early mid-20s, and they built that building in 1927. So the Hotel Yucca was formerly called the Swastika Hotel, and then it became InBank. In 1972, they moved the vault over to the 2-level, and most of the top 4th level to the 6th level, 4th to 6th, were hotel rooms. And my mother came to Trinidad to work in the hotel. It was called the Hotel Yucca. She came after the World War II. My father was back as a Navy veteran, and he picked her up at the Trinidad train station and brought her here to Raton, and 9 children later, we were all part of the bank building. We had family history with the bank. Every Christmas, the bank would have a party with the store mostly at the country club, where they would have a live band and people would dance together, jitterbug, and all the children would get to go to these family and employee parties. And it was quite a fun time. My grandfather also had secret presents for Christmas for everybody. He always had engraved envelopes, and you would wake up to the Christmas tree, the long needle pine trees with $100 bill and your Christmas present. So it was quite an experience to have a grandfather that was well-known banker. It started in 1918. The bank had $38,000 in a cigar box, supposedly on First Street was their first place, and the miners would give him money to save, and he would save it for them. And about 1917, his partner Ed Triplett said, we have to do something with this money. So they got the legal requirements met to become a Bank of New Mexico. It was called International State Bank. And in 1918, he moved the building to this building, which we toured earlier.
Nice.
Old marking machine. These are some old marking machines that we would do the printing on. You know, it was a clothing store for men's, women, and children. We had shoes, and we had gift store. We're like a little Dillard's with pillows and towels, and that's where I worked when I was a high school kid, in the basement, folding towels and marking the dresses. We also had fashion shows at the Spur Supper Club. My sisters and I, we wore the Kate Greenaway dresses, and we all had matching anklets and matching shoes and hats, gloves to go to mass, and it was quite the Camelot of being a kid, you know. Well, in his day, of course, they worked on the concept that a handshake was the most meaningful contract, and so loans were brought for new businesses and loans for families to work here, to have their houses and their families. It was part of their job to go out into the community. The managers and the owners of the bank were always out talking to the people and going to they would drive around in a Studebaker. He had a group of 3 men called the Three Musketeers, John Southwell, Paul Castler, and my grandfather. Every Sunday, my aunt would take them for a drive around town. They would look at the houses that they had invested in through loans, and the buildings and the businesses. So it was always a teamwork effort and a group spirited. And the parties they used to throw for the employees were just phenomenal. One of the mottos of our advertising thing was exclusive but not expensive. I thought that was a great, we always remember that as part of the ads.
Exclusive but not expensive.
Right, and the one thing they did differently, which you probably don't see anymore, is they would bill the people. You never had to bring your wallet and pay money. You would get billed monthly. One of the heritages of the Italian men is that they didn't want their women running the building. So as soon as Dad passed away, she bought the building and managed the building. Her name was Ruth Swanson. I have to bring her up because she'll come back, and she was from Telluride, Colorado, and through Denver. And so she bought the building in 1986. They've been renting it since then, and it's been a very functional building in the downtown, and we want to make it come back to life again.
And our last guest is Steve Wharton, who has spent years of his life cultivating the creative community through Raton, Trinidad, all of southern Colorado, northern New Mexico, through his magazine, New Legends. And we're going to hear from him right now.
You know, this region, southern Colorado and northeast New Mexico, just unbelievable atmosphere for photography. You know, I mean, of course, the fabulous sunsets and sunrises, the colors, so magnificent at this altitude up in the mountains. But there's so much of a range of backgrounds and things to use. I found this when I used to be in Santa Fe, very similar situation, that you could transport from the river and the water, which has a little bit of lush, you know, trees and stuff, but then you can be out in the desert, you have the mountains, you have the plains, you have the canyons, you know, so it really is just an endless array of backgrounds. So if you don't want to CGI and AI everything, you know, it is still nice. Well, in my past photography, completely different world than what I do since I moved to Trinidad. I used to do the commercial work like for magazine covers, that type of thing. So when I actually moved here, kind of thought I was a little semi-retired from all that and didn't really know where all that expertise was ever going to get used. Then, when we started doing the New Legends magazine, that's when I got to pull from all that experience. And so I used local models so people would recognize them, but still put the fashion magazine flair to the ads. Now, I pretty well insisted that I did people's ads for them, and I didn't charge them anything so that we could have the sharpest magazine out there. You know, I found that the first day, very first issue of the magazine, after I'd been rushing all around to get them out, I took a little break. I was sitting there at a little restaurant, Mission at the Bell. I was sitting next to a younger couple that come in, and they were talking about the magazine. They picked one up at the front, and I heard her, as she flipped the first page, she saw one of the jewelry ads. She said, "Oh, is this Trinidad?" She said, "This looks like Vogue magazine." And I was going, all right, exactly what I was going for. And so, you know, back to the New Legends magazine, you know, it was just something that I wanted to do for our region because it is such a beautiful town. Architecture is unbelievable. I actually had never set foot in Trinidad before we moved here. My wife was from Raton, right across the border, and we moved here to be closer to her family and her mother especially. So I came to Trinidad not expecting a lot, 8,000 people, and I started walking downtown. I was looking at the beautiful buildings. I was going, okay, where does this come from, this small town? Well, then I started studying the history, love the Old West, and the history of the town. It was so much so that honestly, I couldn't see why Trinidad isn't the most famous Old West town, because all the main characters that you hear about, you know, the Wyatt Earps, the Bat Mastersons, Doc Hollidays, even Jesse James at one point, all those folks at some point spent some time in Trinidad. The combination of online and print, because a lot of people were going, oh, print is dead, and we started doing this. Started 2015, came out 2016, and I didn't believe that. I'd seen too many ebbs and flows of things that were trendy in my years of marketing, and I knew there was still a large audience for the written material. And then when you back up the written material with the online presence, it's amazing how they both help each other out and make it grow. And so we went from the first year we were only going to do 20,000 magazines, and only twice a year, but people wanted to see it more often, so we quickly went to a quarterly, and we quickly grew within a year to 50,000 every quarter. For our town in this area, that's an unbelievable amount of magazines. But the distribution is what is so vitally important, because you can print all the magazines you want. It's how many get read. And ours flew off the shelves. I mean, I was just hoping to compete with tourist magazines like Santa Fe magazine and Vail, and Taos magazine. But by the end of the second year, we were actually outperforming all those magazines. We drew from the history, so the covers, I kind of grab a couple of them just so you can see them. We'll see some more, but we'd take famous characters, and so the covers look like this. It wasn't somebody on skis coming down the mountain or somebody out fishing on a lake. I don't fault the other visitors guides for doing that. That's a good idea, but if we're going to do something to compete with them, you can't just look like them, and you need to find your own kind of little niche market to go after. Well, we found out it wasn't just a niche market, it was a huge market. People that love history, and so that helped the magazines fly off the shelf. I call it a well-disguised visitor's guide, because that's what it is, a visitor's guide, but it's well disguised with interesting history stories. And so you have the stories, but then when you get past that, and part of New Legends is talking about the people that are alive now doing exciting, great things. The distribution myself, because I actually enjoyed taking the magazines around, because when I would take them around, people would see me putting the magazines out, and that's when they would come up and give me the comments. Very few negative, mostly all good positive comments. Quite often I would hear, oh, I like that story about so-and-so, but you know what? My great-grandfather, my great-grandmother, and then they'd proceed to give us a story, that you're not going to find online. You're not going to Google it and find it, because these are the family heritage stories passed down. So I get their information. We get the writers to interview them, get a photograph and all that. And so we'd get stories that nobody else really had ever published. And I used to always have a little saying, and I believe it to be true, that everyone is photogenic. You just have to get the right photographer. But when you can get people to relax and be themselves and have their personality come through, it just does make them photogenic. It's beautiful.
I prayed to God for a rock and roll career. He gave me a one-horse ranch out on the frontier.